Breaking tonight, President Trump meeting with Vietnamese leaders as his historic trip to Asia winds down. Hello and welcome to a special 2-hour edition of Justice. I'm Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us. My opening statement is just minutes away, but first we're about to watch a welcoming ceremony at the presidential palace in Hanoi, Vietnam, where it is 9 a.m. Sunday morning. Good morning, Vietnam. And President Trump meeting with that nation's president, and we will be showing you live pictures throughout the next 2 hours. But first, we're joined on the phone by our John Roberts, who's traveling with the president. Hi, John.
Judge, good morning to you from Vietnam. Good evening there in New York City. The president is really looking forward to his visit with President Quan of Vietnam. He wants to reaffirm the relatively new ties between the United States and Vietnam. He's also looking for his help on solving the Gordian knot of North Korea. There's some thought that Vietnam could play an intermediary role between the United States and North Korea. And then, of course, a couple of the other things that the president will be talking about with Quang during their official bilateral meeting. He is expanding trade between the United States and Vietnam. The president saying at the APEC conference the other day, in no uncertain terms, that these large multilateral trading relationships like the Trans-Pacific Partnership are going to be no more as far as the United States is concerned, because the president believes that they're not a good deal for the U.S. So he'll be talking with Quang about expanding bilateral trade between the United States and Vietnam. As well, it looks like the United States is looking for some real estate here in Hanoi, Judge. And the reason for that is they want to build a big new United States embassy. And another little piece of the puzzle when it comes to expanding U.S.-Vietnamese relations is we are supposed to be, in the next little while, transferring ownership of a Coast Guard cutter to Vietnam to help in coastal defense. And, of course, with China developing to the degree it is militarily in the South China Sea, having a good friend and ally like Vietnam is now out there patrolling the seas will help to provide security for that area, along, of course, with the ships of the U.S. 7th Fleet, Judge.
All right, John Roberts, thanks so much. We're going to check back with you a little later. And, of course, we'll bring you all the breaking news tonight from the president's trip and his live comments from Vietnam as they happen. But now, my opening statement. Is it dangerous to be a Trump supporter? Well, it's unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime. With conviction and an air of condescension, the left so hates Donald Trump and those who support him that they sanction the use of violence against them. They are attempting to recast our legal system without authority to do so, without legislative sanction, and without judicial imprimatur. To them, the use of physical violence is legal, proper, and justified if they disagree with your politics. The very ones who call you fascists and label themselves anti-fascist or Antifa are changing the rules, propagating a legal theory that is not only outrageously incorrect and an affront to democracy, it is an outright attempt at anarchy. Evidence. A man calmly asks whether players on a baseball field in D.C. are Democrats or Republicans. A documented Republican and Trump hater, he doesn't start shooting until he's told the players are Republicans. And Republican Congressman and Majority Whip Steve Scalise is shot and forever bears the scars of that hatred and violence. After the shooting, instead of a discussion of this issue of hatred, there's a concerted effort to claim the shooter was just a nut job. The mainstream media and the left more comfortable blaming a crazy man or guns for the actions of a leftist Trump-hating progressive. This guy wasn't crazy. That's an excuse to not deal with the left's hatred of the right. Had he been crazy, he would have been found so, or at least incompetent to stand trial when previously arrested. The man was in business. He had licenses for those businesses. He was focused, lucid, and clear in his attempt to commit violence against the right. Evidence. In California, a teacher at the Martin Luther King Middle School tells her class that it is okay to use violence against the right, and such is not a crime. Yvette or Yvonne Falarca, who is so open about her hatred and use of violence that she's charged with inciting a riot and arrested for her actions, and she's a member of the leftist group By Any Means Necessary. She's caught on camera assaulting a member of a workers' party, and she and her counter-protesters chased, hit, and even stabbed members of that traditional worker party. And the Berkeley Unified School District has reinstated her this past fall at the middle school. And just last week, Rand Paul suffered 6 broken ribs by his liberal neighbor, whose lawyer claims the assault was about leaves. If it is determined by federal investigators now looking into this unprovoked attack that it was politically motivated, well, then this would just be another example of the left's actionable hatred. Antifa itself, the ones in the black ninja outfits and masks in order to prevent their ID and arrest, believe they are justified in not only destroying property and burning buildings, but also assaulting anyone who disagrees with their socialist agenda. And if that's not enough, law enforcement is also standing down, not detaining, not arresting, not stopping the violence. And amazingly, folks, the order actually coming from the top, from a chief of police, a sheriff, a superintendent, a governor, directing cops to violate their oath to protect victims and the public. The proof is in the pudding. After 12 hours of violence in Berkeley that involved individuals as well as property, only one arrest. And if you were in Washington, as I was on Inauguration Day, you know they aren't shy about it. Madonna at a microphone saying she was thinking of blowing up the White House. Kathy Griffin puts a vile picture of herself holding a bloody likeness of the president's head on social media. The goal of these haters is to normalize, incite, and mobilize hatred and turn it into violence. Now, OFA, Organizing for Action, once Obama for America, is a democratic protest movement with Barack Obama at its helm, and it's reportedly busing protesters to events. And Hillary, of course, wants to be the head of the resistance. Let's be clear. The claim that words alone or beliefs justify violence is so far afield from the common law and our legal foundations that most people are smart enough to not even entertain or argue it. It's not just speech these organized, militant, self-anointed activists seek to shut down. They seek to upend the very rules upon which our criminal justice system is based. These Trump-hating progressives claim that assault is legitimate and justified, that it's okay to punch a fascist, and that their thinking is starting to become mainstream, folks. In 2016, Americans elected Donald Trump. We were tired of 8 years of a lawless Obama presidency. We believed that the outsider, Donald Trump, was just the one to bring back law and order and truth and justice. Little did we know that the law and order we craved wasn't just about enforcing the law, like violations that occurred before our very eyes by the Clintons, by Lois Lerner, Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder, and that lot. But instead, it's now about preventing a complete takeover of the justice system by infiltrating in the minds of millennials and militant forces that justice tolerates violence. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram, hashtag Judge Jeanine. Let's take another live look at Hanoi, Vietnam, where President Trump is taking part in a welcoming ceremony with the Vietnamese president. We're going to bring you live pictures on the screen as they happen. But joining me now with reaction to my opening statement and much more is author and conservative columnist Ann Coulter. All right, Ann, welcome. And, you know, Ann, you are very much a part of this whole topic because, although I didn't talk much about it, they tried to stop you from speaking at Berkeley and did.
Well, yeah, and I've been subjected to leftist violence for about 20 years now. I mean, you and I need bodyguards. My bodyguard, my longtime bodyguard, in fact, died a year ago today, not from leftist violence. It was a freak accident. But I mean, I have to go around with bodyguards. Michael Moore doesn't. Bill Maher doesn't. Chelsea Handler doesn't. No, the left has always been the violent one. This has historically been true. I wrote about it in my book, Demonic. I can't thank you enough for talking about this. Every presidential assassination in U.S. history, so, you know, we only have about 225 years we're looking at, has, if it had a political motive, it was from someone on the left. Every single one. Some were just totally crazy. And yes, sometimes there are crazy people.
Right.
But the left is constantly ginning their side up to be violent. I mean, the Antifa is one of the latest incarnations of this. There was Occupy Wall Street, the WTO protests, Black Lives Matter, the Weathermen, the Weather Underground.
You can
just
left.
go on and on and on. Look, any liberal can show up on a college campus. Any liberal can show up at Liberty University. They would be treated with utmost respect. People like us can't walk around many parts of this city without having bodyguards with us. They think they are justified in attacking us. Not only now, how does the left gin it up? They call us fascists. They call us haters. They call us white supremacists and Nazis. And what does our side, Republicans, Mitt Romney and Marco Rubio say? They say yes. Well, one side are fascists and the other side are fighting fascists. Our side is condoning the violence against people like me.
But, you know,
and even forget me, how about Charles Murray? How about that liberal biology professor out at Evergreen State? He disagreed with something. He's called a racist, and the police say they won't protect him.
Well, let me just remind our viewers that what you're looking at, as I'm talking to Ann Coulter here, is the president's arriving in Vietnam. It's morning there, and there are ceremonies there, I believe, in Hanoi at the palace. But and let's talk about the Tea Party. For years, the Tea Party was blamed as this violent organization. The most I ever heard, as I recall, was that, and it's horrible if it's true, was that there was a racial slur. Although I don't know if anything. Well, they say it's disproved, but I never heard $100,000 reward that was to go, and nobody was ever violently hurt by someone in the Tea Party because of their and yet right now we still have that echo of the Tea Party being racist. But what is going on in this country? What can we do to make it clear these people can't do this anymore?
No, I mean, the country is in a civil war, and frankly, I wish the president were back in this country dealing with it and not flying around.
We got to deal with the rest of the world too.
But in fact, at the Tea Party rallies, well, for one thing, they were all families. They'd leave the park cleaner than when they showed up. But Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, they would call them, oh, they're dangerous, they're right-wing extremists, they're full of hate. There was parents with their kids. I mean, that does tend to be more conservative. My own case to the contrary, conservatives do tend to be married with children, and that's who they're bringing into these Trump rallies, where Trump ralliers were set upon. At the Tea Parties, conservatives were attacked by left-wingers setting upon the Tea Partiers. But this has always been the case. The left is constantly in search of some right-winger someplace engaging in violence. But to the extent it happens, to the extent you can find one someplace, it would be like right now talking about the problem of women sexual predators in Hollywood. Yeah. Maybe you can find one. Maybe you can find one right-winger out there. But that's not what the problem is.
Well, let's talk about the fact that there's this liberal outlet that mocked Rand Paul and the vicious beating he took. So irrespective of whether there was a political motivation, we don't know. The feds are investigating it. But some splinter writer argues that the type of injuries Paul suffered, 6 broken ribs, compared to how small his attacker was, means that Paul has weak bones and he needs to drink more milk. How pathetic is that?
No, they laugh. I mean, if you or I were hit with a baseball bat, Sarah Palin hit by a baseball bat, they would laugh. It would be funny to them. By the way, this is the second time Rand Paul has been physically attacked by a liberal when he was campaigning the first time. It was a famous incident. That crazy woman ran at him with a sign. He's just like trying to wave to his supporters.
I do remember
fans,
this now.
You wonder why we're not that friendly to you. We don't know if they're fans or not. Is running up to him, His fans pull her back. She makes another run for it. They pull her back again, put her on the ground, and say, "Stay down." One guy puts his foot on her shoulder. That became the head stomping incident.
Right, but
except there was no head stomping. This is the second time Rand Paul has been physically attacked. And by the way, if Rand Paul isn't telling us what the motive was because he's trying to be a magnanimous John McCain type, you better word to the wise. Everybody thinks there's something nefarious going on. Apparently, it's not an affair, because the guy, I've read that his liberal attacker is divorced.
It's divorced. That's good to know.
This is not a good time to be magnanimous. We're dying to know.
Let me just, I want to go back to this one thing with Antifa. You know, on the one hand, the police in sanctuary cities, you know, basically they're told to stand down, that not assist their on immigration, their federal law enforcement brothers and sisters in, you know, deporting immigrants and arresting and detaining them. But now what we're seeing is that law enforcement is standing down when violence is occurring. When the police chief or the person in charge of the police says, you know, I don't have a problem with this liberal group. Let's let them do their thing. That's anarchy.
No, that happened in Charlottesville quite clearly, and then the police directed the people who had the permit for the rally straight into the hands of the Antifa. I mean, Cheryl, what's her middle name? I forget. Very left-wing reporter for the New York Times, Cheryl Gay Stolberg. That's who it is. She was live. She was tweeting live. She said the left is as violent as the right. By the way, this is not only the second attack on Rand Paul. This is the second Bernie Sanders supporters to kill someone this year. That guy on the train killed. Bernie Sanders supporters killed 2 people on a train earlier this year. All right, in Oregon.
Ann Coulter, always good to have you here. And thank you so much. And remember, we're keeping an eye on Hanoi, Vietnam, where President Bush. Yeah, it's President Trump, guys. He's meeting with that country's president. Keep it here. It's 2017. And Citizens United president and Fox News contributor David Bossie is here next. Stay with us.
Colon cancer screening for
President Trump on a tweet storm over the last few hours, commenting on fake news, China, Putin, and our relations with Russia. One of his tweets saying, when will all the haters and fools out there realize that having a good relationship with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing? They're always playing politics, bad for our country. I want to solve North Korea, Syria, Ukraine, terrorism, and Russia can greatly help. Here with reaction, Citizens United president and former Trump deputy campaign manager David Bossie. He's also a Fox News contributor. David, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let me ask you this. It appears that the president is taking enormous criticism for what little he has said about Putin, and he's even being misquoted. So he said, look, I spoke to Putin, and, you know, I asked him about the meddling or whatever, and Putin denied it, of course. And what Trump said was, I believe he meant it when he said it. All of the press goes ballistic and says Trump believes Putin that he didn't meddle.
Look, this is Judge. This is disgusting. It is completely what I consider irresponsible and dangerous for the Democrat Party. They are putting American lives at risk, and that's what the president said today. It is. I completely agree with him. Look, what he has been saying is that the Russian collusion issue is a made-up investigation by the Democrats, falsely accused with no evidence. That has been going on for over a year. We've been watching with nothing to come from it. However, the Democrats continue to attack his relationship with Putin. That makes it a dangerous foreign policy decision for the Democrats to continue to this great divide and force the president, who just listens to Putin say He says he didn't do it. What diplomacy is what the president just did. And that is an amazing thing that the Democrats and John McCain are dangerous.
You know what? What is he supposed to do? Have a fist fight with him on the sideline and say, no, my intelligence agency said you meddled. Look, everybody agrees apparently that they meddled. The issue is at the direction of Putin. And you know what?
The president doesn't disagree with that.
Yeah, right. He doesn't disagree with it. But then, you know what I love? I love that John McCain comes out and he says he wants a comment. It's so personal with him and the president that his personal venom is not allowing him to be objective. He says something like, there's nothing America first about Trump taking the word of a KGB colonel over that of Americans' intelligence community. And he goes after Trump when it's now clear that Trump never said it. It's just John McCain just hates him so much. You got to worry whether or not this person, McCain, is more interested in America and the success of this country or in destroying Donald Trump.
It's just another black mark on John McCain's legacy. It is a terrible thing on Veterans Day, and John McCain, is an American war hero many years ago. Well, and I respect him for that. But it is what he has become, what he is now doing in the United States Senate. It goes against the Republican Party, goes against what we are as conservatives. And for him to just personally attack this president on a daily basis, it just is beneath him. And I pity, I feel sorry for him.
Well, let me ask you this. I want to move on to Roy Moore, the Senate race in Alabama. 2 GOP senators have withdrawn their support. And Mitt Romney has actually said, another Republican, the presumption of innocence only applies in a court of law. It doesn't really apply here. I mean, how can this guy, and if the allegations are true, I mean, I spent my career going after sexual predators and pedophiles, trust me. But right now, it's 40 years later. I doubt there could ever even be a charge filed here. The guy has been investigated a million times, Roy Moore, apparently more than any other candidate in Alabama. Is the Republican Party destroying itself, or didn't they do enough vetting of this guy Moore?
Well, first of all, I don't know the answers to those questions, but I can say this, that Judge Moore has been on the ballot many times over a long period of time. How this just miraculously comes out when this Hollywood, Weinstein and the atmosphere that is pervasive, which is the second there's an allegation, the person is guilty. In Weinstein's case, and a lot of people in Hollywood, these lowlifes in Hollywood on the left, they are accurate. But
wait a minute,
they're besmirching this guy.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. I want you to keep going. With Louis C.K., he admitted stuff. Kevin Spacey, apparently there are a lot, and a lot of it is recent. And with Harvey Weinstein, the NYPD wired up one of the women, and she's got him on tape where he's admitting he did what she said he did. This is 40 years ago.
No, but the reason I bring that up is because it's the atmosphere that we are in. If that allegation had come out in a different time, I don't know that it would be getting this type of seriousness by anyone. And for Mitt Romney and John McCain and these guys to attack him, they would attack a conservative at any turn, at any time now. And it is, quite honestly, I'm repelled by them at this point. It's so disappointing.
The whole thing is ugly, and let's hope that none of it is true. But let's hope that
that's right. That's what I'm hoping.
If it is, I mean, it's just an example.
It is a remarkable thing that one of the accusers is a Hillary Clinton supporter and volunteer, and was with Joe Biden. And I mean, it's a very interesting thing that it seems to be a Democrat activist, a leftist activist in Alabama is one of these. And the Washington Post put her up as somebody. Well, thank you very much,
David. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And retired Brigadier General Anthony Tata is on deck. Don't go away. Welcome Welcome back to this special 2-hour edition of Justice, and a ton to talk about tonight with the president now in the final leg of his historic Asia trip. We're awaiting his remarks in just a short time, which we'll take live as soon as they begin. But first, here with a reaction to the trip so far, retired Brigadier General Tony Tata, best-selling author of Besieged. General, first, I have to say on this Veterans Day, thank you for your service and all that you have done, not just during the course of your service, but in your books. I understand that you are a best-selling author, and you have another one that you just gave me, and I'm going to be sure to read. It's coming out in December.
Well, thank you, Judge.
All right, let's talk about this trip. How has it gone so far? And I want to be clear on one thing, that the mainstream media is casting the trip in a very negative light. Every opportunity they get, even misquoting the president, and then allowing everyone to pile on the misquote. Well, how do you interpret this trip?
Well, Judge, you know, that's to be expected, because the mainstream media not only wants the president to fail, they want the country to fail. And when you look at what's happening, this is a landmark achievement the president is achieving right now. South Korea, Japan, meetings with China, meetings with Russia, Putin. All of this is part of the diplomatic and information power that we need. The overarching objective is to squeeze North Korea, get them to capitulate, give them that golden bridge out, let Kim Jong-un stay in power, perhaps, but not as a nuclear power. And so right now what's happening is you got back-channel discussions going on with Korea, you got back-channel discussions going on with China, you got maybe Russia. This is, you know, the president's quote, it'd be a great thing, not just a good thing.
Right,
because, you know, right now, China has torqued down the economic sanctions using economic power through the UN resolution, but Russia, I think, is leaking a little bit over that.
Even though they agreed to it at the UN.
Right.
But let me ask you this. Just because someone like Russia is not a friend, that doesn't necessarily mean that they always have to be an enemy, does it? Are there some times where, like with North Korea, where we have interests that might be joined?
It's that old saying, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And
right.
So, you know, Russia right now is a very contentious relationship with us in Estonia and Ukraine and all of that. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean we can't deal on the eastern side of their border where they have geopolitical interests. They do not want nuclear war in North Korea. They do not want a major war where the West could actually come up to the border of Russia and China. They love having that buffer there, and they love North Korea provoking, but it's brinksmanship, and they don't want it to go to nuclear war. I can promise you that.
Well, let me ask you about Japan. Apparently we have 50,000 troops in Japan. We have 28,000 troops in South Korea. What are they doing there?
Well, they're preparing for war. They're training, and they're helping the South Korean and the other allies in that region prepare for defense of the Republic of Korea, which is, you know, I have been in the demilitarized zone a couple of times. I have trained on these major shows of force that we do over there, and you know, my last years as a general officer, I went over there and talked about asymmetric warfare. North Korea has a very good army. They have 8,000 artillery tubes along the demilitarized zone. They have 4,000 rocket launchers. All of these can reach about 15 to 20 million people
in South Korea.
In Seoul.
In Seoul, right.
And so that's the dilemma.
So here's a question. Let me ask you this, and there's a lot of disagreement on this. If Kim Jong-un from North Korea sends a nuclear warhead, an ICBM, they say that he can hit Seoul before we can prevent that missile from hitting us.
Well, so we've got the terminal high-altitude defense systems there, the THAAD missiles that you heard about. So they're deployed throughout the region, and that's very confidential where they are and so forth. But we also have you know, ways to detect what's happening and what their preparations are. And we didn't mention the 6,000 troops that we've got in Guam, and so that's where our strategic arsenal is. And so when we think about what we've got in Japan, what we've got in South Korea, and what we've got in Guam, I believe Secretary Mattis when he says we have a good option here. And what I believe that involves is a conventional option along the border to stymie those 8,000 and 4,000 artillery tubes and rocket launchers, and then potentially nuke Pyongyang. And that's a whole problem for China.
All right, let me, because we only have a few seconds left. You know, Vietnam is, for some people, a bad memory in this country. I mean, we were very divided about that war. As this president goes to Vietnam now, what do you think, you know, our reaction to this should be as Americans?
That's a great question, Judge. It should be one that we've got Japan and we've got Germany from World War II, who are major partners now. Vietnam, we had a lot of blood and treasure die there, and on this Veterans Day, we should acknowledge that. By the same token, I think those same veterans would be glad to have them as a prospering nation that is trading with us and also acting as a buffer to China, who's building these artificial islands in the South China Sea to extend their military reach to control more resources along the Vietnamese coastline and along the Philippines coastline.
All right, General Tata, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Great to be here.
And we're talking Washington's worst next. Don't go away. Joining me now to talk about the Obama-era holdovers in Washington, D.C. and why they need to go and why they're still there, former Department of Justice election attorney J. Christian Adams. Good evening, Christian. How are you?
Hey, Judge. Good. How are you?
Okay. Now, people ask me all the time. I give speeches all over the country, and people say to me, well, why are they still there? Why don't they just fire him? Obama fired all of the Bush people when he came in. Well, you were there. Give us an idea of what it's like and why it's not being done.
Well, because a lot of these people are deeply embedded. They've been at the Justice Department, for example, for 20, 30 years. They're very comfortable in their jobs. But, Judge, as you know, many of them are part of what's called the Senior Executive Service, SES. And these people can be moved out on Monday or told they have 3 weeks to pack their stuff up because they're going to go to Duluth, Minnesota to study snowfall. I mean, that's what the administration could do.
The administration can't be sued.
No, they're SES. They're at the top of the pyramid.
Okay, but
for a government
my viewers
employee.
don't know what SES means. I mean, Senior Executive Service, but that means even though you have a job, you can't be fired, but you can be moved.
Right.
Okay.
And they can be moved out of the swamp, out of Washington, to where it's really cold, and they might not want to move, and they might quit. A lot of good ththings can happen, but you can send these people that have been causing trouble.
Can we move to Guam?
Hey, Guam's a great place. I have a case there in U.S. federal court. But look, I love Guam. Let me tell you, there are people in the department that are causing the problem. For 8 years under Eric Holder, Judge, we didn't have voter fraud prosecutions. What happens when you don't prosecute?
We did not have voter fraud prosecutions for 8 years. Are you sure about that?
Right. I mean, we had people double voting. We had non-citizens voting, and people in the swamp refused to enforce the law. And what do you get more of when you refuse to enforce the law? You get more crime.
Right.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this. Aren't there cases that I remember last year reading about a county where there were more votes for a particular candidate than there were voters in the county, registered voters?
Yeah, this is a problem with the voter rolls all over the country. My organization's litigating right now against Broward County in federal court in the Southern District of Florida. But the Justice Department should be fixing this. There's a man there by the name of Richard Pilger. He's the head of the election crimes branch. Obama put him there. Holder put him there. He's the guy responsible for no voter fraud prosecutions for 8 years. There were double voters. There was a congressional candidate in Maryland. Her name was Wendy Rosen.
I remember.
She voted twice for President Obama. She wasn't federally prosecuted. Federal laws being violated all around the country on election crimes, voter fraud.
So why are we paying these people if they're not doing the job?
because nobody's asking the right questions. You are tonight. Why do people they're like the Maytag repairman, right? Richard Pilger was there for 8 years, didn't do anything. The problem was the system was broken, unlike the Maytag machine. The system was broken, and he didn't do anything for 8 years.
Okay, so if they're not prosecuting, and they're in the Department of Justice, and we've got all of these illegalities going on, and nobody's prosecuting these cases, then shouldn't Jeff Sessions, and, I have my own problems with him as it relates to Clinton, Loretta Lynch, everybody else, Uranium One, Molly 99, that's my new thing now, uranium's used for medical imaging, nuclear medicine. This is his bailiwick, too?
Yeah, Sessions, I've said it on your show before, he's not the problem. But there are going to be people above people like Richard Pilger, people above other swamp creatures who don't want to do anything about the problem. I'm on the President's Voter Fraud Commission, and one of the things we're looking at is, what do you do to stop voter fraud? Well, step one is you start prosecuting it. And he hasn't done it for 8 years.
Wow, you know what? That is shocking. Richard Pilger, we're going to put him on Washington's Worst. We're going to get his picture up next time, along with Koskinen, and the good news is Koskinen's gone, so maybe we had something to do with it, maybe not. Jay Christian Adams, thanks for being with us.
Good night.
All right, good night. And remember, in our second hour, we're going to take you live to Hanoi for President Trump's press conference. But Greg Jarrett, that amazing lawyer, is standing by. Another hour of justice still ahead, but first, did former FBI Director James Comey obstruct justice by protecting Hillary Clinton from prosecution? Here to weigh in is Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Good evening, Greg. There was a story in The Hill this week that says a newly discovered document shows that FBI Director Jim Comey authored a draft statement accusing Clinton of mishandling classified documents and being grossly negligent. And this was confirmed by Senator Chuck Grassley, of course, who is a very well-respected chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And it says that the words gross negligence were edited and crossed out with extreme carelessness. Talk to us. What does this mean?
Well, John Solomon of The Hill uncovered the document, and it is a crime to mishandle classified documents through gross negligence. Comey wrote out a letter of exoneration of Hillary Clinton in which he crossed out the words gross negligence and substituted extreme carelessness. Now, those terms are synonymous under the law. Comey appears to not have understood that. This seems to be evidence that he was trying to absolve Hillary Clinton and conjured up an excuse to protect her. So if he did that, he needs to be put under oath and explain why he did that. Why did he change the language? Did he do it for political reasons? Was he pressured by Loretta Lynch or others to absolve and clear Hillary Clinton? And if the answer is yes, that would be obstruction of justice. And
you know what's interesting, Greg? When you put that alongside the fact that this exoneration draft memo was written 6-7 weeks before 17 witnesses, including the target herself, Hillary, was even interviewed, that is further corroborating circumstantial evidence that the intent of James Comey was to protect Hillary Clinton. Now, let me tell you something. I have heard some people, even on this channel, say, they do it all the time. If I were going to exonerate. It has never been done. I've done this for 32 years. I've been a prosecutor and I've been a judge. I have never, ever, nor has anyone I know, written an exoneration before most of the witnesses are interviewed. This is corruption. I'm sorry. I could prove this to a jury.
It does appear to be corruption. I've been a lawyer 37 years. I've never seen it, never heard of it. And not only did Comey appear to misinterpret the law on gross negligence, there's another statute Hillary Clinton seems to have violated, and that is willfully and knowingly mishandling classified documents. In his infamous news conference, James Comey said she didn't intend to break the law. That's not the legal standard. The legal test is, did she commit intentional acts that violated the law? The answer is yes. She intentionally set up a private email server. She intentionally used it exclusively for all of her documents, including 110 classified documents. That is per se violation of the Espionage Act.
You know, Greg, what is so disappointing about all this, and you know, we understand this, and the public understands this, the public gets it, is that people are so disappointed that Washington is what we always suspected it was. And this is something that the president has agreed to end. And yet we're not seeing any resolution of this except for exceptional people like John Solomon of the Hill and others. What do we do?
Well, Jeff Sessions needs to resign, as I've said on many occasions, but before he does, he needs to appoint a second special counsel to investigate Hillary Clinton, reopen the case involving her email scandal under the Espionage Act, and add to that an investigation of corruption, pay to play in the Uranium One deal, as well as the payment to foreign nationals for the dossier on Donald Trump. That violates 3 different criminal statutes. And finally, let's add in the rigging nomination of statutes, criminal statutes that she violated there, including
Greg,
money laundering.
We gotta go. Got a hard break. Greg Jarrett, thanks so much for being with us. Sure. And we're keeping an eye on the presidential palace in Hanoi, Vietnam. President Trump will be speaking in the next hour, and we are staying live. Hour 2 of Justice is straight ahead. Stay close. Breaking this hour, President Trump meeting with leaders in Vietnam and readying for a joint press conference with that country's president. Hello and welcome to a special second hour of Justice. I'm Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. And if you missed tonight's opening statement, you get to see it in a moment. But first, we are joined live from Hanoi, Vietnam by Fox News reporter John Roberts. So, John, what's going on now?
Hey, Judge, good to talk to you. Well, the rain has finally stopped, which is a good thing, considering that the event with the president of Vietnam is going to be outside. The sun is actually beginning to poke its head out just a little bit, so it looks like the event is going to come off without a hitch. Clearly, the two presidents are going to be talking about increased cooperation between the United States and Vietnam on North Korea. There have been some people who have suggested that Vietnam, because of its history with China, could play an effective intermediary between the United States and North Korea in terms of getting to the table, not necessarily in negotiations, but getting to the table to begin negotiations for North Korea to dial back its nuclear program. The two presidents will also talk about trade. They'll likely talk about the fact that the United States is looking for some property for a new embassy here in Hanoi, and then the United States transferring a Coast Guard vessel to Vietnam to add it to its Navy. Particularly important considering China's developments in the South China Sea. Now, something else that has raised its head as well happened yesterday as the president was flying from Da Nang, where he was at the APEC conference, here to Hanoi. He was asked about a couple of meetings that he had with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And the president was asked if he talked with Putin about whether or not Russia meddled in the U.S. election. The president said yes, he did. And he again received assurances from Vladimir Putin that there was no Russian meddling in the election. The president was asked, do you believe him? The president responded, I believe. And then he paused. He says, I really believe that when he tells me that, he means it. Now, that's been interpreted in some circles as the president believes that Vladimir Putin did not meddle in the U.S. election, to the contradiction of what the intelligence community, including the CIA, has determined. And that's prompted some criticism from people like John McCain, who believes that the president is willing to side with an old KGB agent as opposed to his own intelligence community, which briefs him on the big national security threats of the day each and every day in the Oval Office. So that's one question that is likely to come up here, Judge, as to whether or not the president can definitively say, without equivocation, whether or not he believes his intelligence community or whether he believes Russian President Vladimir Putin. Also up for a question today could be whether or not he got everything he was looking for from China on North Korea. Clearly, he was looking for China to adhere to United Nations Security Council resolutions regarding North Korea. But the president has always said he wanted China to do more. We didn't hear any Q&A from President Xi and President Trump, because President Xi just doesn't like to be asked questions. So that's something that's open for question as well. And then, of course, there's a few other things that are always swirling around whenever the president's traveling anywhere, Judge.
You know, John, it's interesting because the president has already said that he agrees that there was meddling, and yet people expect that he's going to change the answer. And people like John McCain who are jumping on him every chance he can get when the guy isn't even in this country and is trying to do what he can to stop the North Korean nuclear effort. But John, what is happening at the palace right now? I mean, what is expected besides a press conference? Is there a breakfast?
What's happening right now? Well, we saw the opening ceremonies an hour ago. What's happening now is that President Trump and President Kwon are just finishing up a bilateral meeting where they'll speak about trade, they'll speak about North Korea and the other items that I laid out for you. The president will come out and have this joint press conference, and then the president is going to go meet with the prime minister as well, the chairman of the Communist Party here in Vietnam.
Wow.
And it's still kind of difficult to wrap your head around
Yes.
when you consider the history of the United States in Vietnam and now the government of Vietnam. This is the second communist nation that the president has been to on this trip, the first one being China. So when you think about the president being the chairman of the Communist Party, and you consider America's history in Vietnam, it's still rather difficult to kind of wrap your head around everything that has happened here. But, you know, President Clinton normalized relations with Vietnam more than 20 years ago now, and the United States and Vietnam, despite their differences in governing, have become fast friends. The president just wants to expand that relationship even further.
All right, John Roberts, thanks. And remember, when President Trump speaks with a reporter in Vietnam in just a few minutes, you're going to see it here live. But first, if you missed tonight's opening statement in the 9 o'clock hour, we're going to play it for you now. Take a look. Is it